PDA is something that hasn't really been diagnosed a lot in Australia, and that we're still not understanding well, even amongst professionals, but certainly among doctors and things. And I guess I'm seeing more and more children who are presenting with the profile. Yep, that's a great word. Thank you. And more and more parents that are like, the traditional strategies are not working. And so I'd love you to speak into a little bit about how you understood PDA, how you learnt about it, and sort of the key signs that were there for you, and what that's meant for you guys.
Yeah, PDA, what a ride. So PDA, it stands for Pathological Demand Avoidance. In some circles, they call it a pervasive drive for autonomy. But basically, it's a nervous system disability. It's very much what they call a hidden disability, and it's a profile of autism. And it is absolutely has been under the radar for a very long time. It's still not formally recognised in Australia, but you're right, like we're seeing it, and therapists are starting to write it on reports and say that, you know, she is presenting with this profile, but it's not formally recognised by the DSM. So it's different for everyone, right? But one of the main features is this threat response, that the child is perceiving threats everywhere that, you know, neurotypical people are not. And so what happens then is the response to stimulus that somebody who has a more regulated nervous system is, I guess, exploded. It's 10 times, right? And so they're kind of always on edge. But then there's this real piece of it that's very perplexing for a lot of PDA kids, where they're very high maskers. They're very socially neurotypical to an extent, right? Like, especially when they're young, and kids' social skills across the board are not as complex. So they're making eye contact, and all these more traditional autism signs are not there for these kids. And their special interests are also not as much in things, but they might be in more social constructs or even in people. And it's very much about one-to-one attention. That is one of the major regulatory strategies, is to have an adult's nervous system and that attention that helps me regulate as a PDA, which as a parent, super challenging to understand, especially when a lot of people aren't aware of it, and so they can't then say to you, oh, this is PDA. So it's quite sometimes you feel quite gaslit, you know, when the kids are younger and you're like, I think my kid's autistic, but they're not. I remember saying that when she was about 2 or 3, I would say, I think she's autistic, but she's not. Lots of screaming, lots of meltdowns, lots of stuff that was obviously sensory, but she couldn't articulate that, and I couldn't identify it because I was like, she's making eye contact, she communicates well, she plays with others, she loves to play with kids her age. So it was only as she got older and I stumbled across a video I used to spend hours just, what is this? And I stumbled across a video from the PDA Society, and I was like, oh. And from that day, when you've got knowledge, you've got power, right? And then I was able to start to learn the variety of strategies, particularly with PDA. With young kids, it's so much about parenting and the language and the environment and their sense of control and autonomy that helps so much.
Let's talk about a few of those key things, because there's some really key differences to the way that you would have been taught, or even the parenting programs that are out there for how to support, whether it's a neurotypical kid or a neurodiverse kid, about dealing with like boundaries and expectations and things throughout the day. One of the biggest challenges that you've noticed, I think, over the time is that craving for autonomy. Do you want to speak into that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. And this can be, perceived by others as, your child is loose, like she needs more discipline. And I would say it's not that, and it's certainly not that out in the world. So she's a very high masker. And so even when we're going through the diagnosis process, the teachers are like, absolutely not. Like, this girl sits in her chair all day and she doesn't really make a peep, and she's got all these friends and she's very clever. And I'm like, yes. And then if you come to the car at 3 o'clock, you might like to see what happens. It's really about understanding and seeing your own child, because then when you start to really get curious, you can see that every time she's told no, or told what to do, told what to eat, told what to wear, told to brush her hair, whatever, that you can just sort of see it. You can see that little increase, and then it becomes a meltdown later on. So she'll mask it, and then boom. But the more that you can give her that sense of control, which is very much about teaching a lot of independent skills very young. She's very independent at what she can do when she has the capacity to do it. If she's too burnt out or she's had too many demands, then she'll say that she can't. So for example, as a skill, she can absolutely run her own shower, no problems. But most nights after a school day, she can't run her own shower. Yeah. So learning those things is a real game changer, right? Because you're like, but you can, so just do it. But it's not that.
And I think that that's a key thing for us to speak into, because, and I reflected this even with my 3-year-old, and I don't know whether she will present with more of those things over time, but if I ask her to do something, often the response is no, or there's becomes like this fight. And traditionally, the way that we were raised is that, well, I'm the adult, I'm the boss, I'm in charge, you will do what I say, and you will do what I say when I say it. And that does not work with a PDA. And I was reflecting on an incident at home just yesterday where I was really proud of myself, because it was a busy morning. We needed to get to daycare, and I wanted her to brush her hair. And in the past, I would have been like, hold her down and brush it and just let her scream and kick. But I was like, Lucy, you need to brush your hair. And I just put them out on the bench, knowing that her first answer was no. And so I was just like, oh, I'm just going to put these here. 10 minutes later, she comes up to me, Mum, can you brush my hair? And so when just by sort of giving her that time and space to process it for herself and to do the thing in her own time, there's still an expectation that she's going to brush her hair, but is not an expectation that she has to do it now because I said now. And I know myself, if someone asks me to do something now because they said it, the irritation that builds up in me, and the need for me to want to just go no, just to piss them off largely. And so I guess you've got some great examples of how you've had to come to terms with that different style of parenting, that it's not like now because I said so. That just doesn't cut it with a PDA.
No. So I had 3 kids under 2. So from the beginning, everything was about routine. So, and I do think that has paid off, because there's sort of there's a sense of safety in knowing what happens when. And so I think that she has that grounding of what happens when every day we really do have quite a structured life. Not that it's restrictive, but that it feels safe.
And I think that that's a really key thing for all kids to have, because if you don't know what's happening next, that creates anxiety for everyone.
We don't go out late at night. We don't stay up late and do things, because that then throws everything out. And that's kind of the choices that we make, because the upside of that is more regulation, more sense of safety, and that with that holds her independence, because she knows that, well, I don't have to tell her. So therefore, there's no demand there. She just sort of knows, and then can choose and set up her own day, knowing that at some point today, I'm going to wash myself. And at some point today, I am going to brush my teeth. Hair is a tough one. It's one I choose that I don't really care too much about. She has very long hair and she likes to wear it out. She never ever wears it up. Teachers have said to me, can you ask her to wear it up for head lice? I'm like, she's never had head lice. No, but you can ask her to wear it up if you like. So there are these conversations that are difficult conversations that I have to choose to have or not to have based on where I think she's at on any given day. And some days I can ask the same question and the answer will be very different. But having the knowledge of what's happening underneath with that anxiety response helps me to understand her more and be more flexible in and open up those communication channels when they get to an age where they can to however I can support her within the boundaries of this is our routine and this is how things work. And there's always times where it might not happen, but then the next day will have had that. Like, for example, maybe she's gone to a sleepover, and so loves it, very draining for her, obviously. New environments, new routines, lots of social, loves it, but very, very draining. So then if she came home and I was like, you need to do all the things you usually do, she wouldn't be able to. So we just let that go, knowing that tomorrow after she's had a good sleep and she's back into regulation, she will do those things.
Gosh, I feel like that must be, as a parent, so freeing in some ways, having that knowledge that that's okay, and that's okay, because I think sometimes as a parent we put pressure on ourselves and we feel like we're failing because we didn't make our kid do all of the things that the other kids are doing, and therefore there's something wrong with us as a parent because we didn't achieve that, and that's not okay. But you gave some really great examples there that even are relevant in our house as well, where I know that if I make the decision to keep my kids out, I've got a 2-year-old and 3-year-old and some older boys, if I'd make the decision to keep particularly the girls out past 5 o'clock, that I'm going to pay for that later. And that's something that I know that it's actually not fair on them that I'm keeping them out past that time, because that's pushing their nervous system to the absolute limit. And so then when we do get home at 6 or 7 o'clock and then I'm trying to rush them through all the things and I'm like, come on, get going. Like that's how my parents would have responded to that. That then that's even more not fair on them, because I've already pushed their nervous system to be able to stay out past their routine anyway, and then I'm putting more pressure on them to do things in accordance with my time frame, and their little bodies just can't handle that. And so I've become so much more aware of the expectations I'm placing on my kids, what their nervous system can handle, what's realistic to expect for them and not realistic, and then that I am going to need to be responsible as the adult to put appropriate supports around them if I've expected too much, and to adjust my expectations of them if something's happened. Maybe I wasn't in control of something, maybe it's been out of my control, but for whatever reason our routine has changed, so much so that their little nervous system is completely dysregulated. And I love the example of, you've had the sleepover, she's come home, she's absolutely spent. I think the same happens for many kids at the end of a school term, or after going to grandma's house for the weekend, after having a babysitter step in, like all of these things that happen in the, like ideally you have that 80-20% of time, but life happens, I suppose. And then just that knowing that, okay, this has been an event, and then we need to support her through this period of regulating before we're going to get back to our routine.
And sometimes that's really uncomfortable for me, that the supporting through the regulation bit, right? Because she's asking for things that are usually a no. But I'm then having to make choices. And you're always making choices based on the situation in front of you, knowing that this is a long game, right? Like, it's not just about this moment. It's about all, like, for PDA, burnout's a very real thing. And that is something I keep in the back of my mind all the time. It's like, if I can have these tools and have these times where I can see we need to just go fully dark room style piece, then I feel like what would you say? I guess you're doing the prevention, right? You're doing the prevention so that hopefully you don't end up in burnout or you don't end up in the meltdown or whatever. And sometimes you do. You can't necessarily prevent everything, but that's one of the biggest things that I've learned is, having a variety of strategies and tools and understanding and being flexible in the moment and keeping communication open, because now she can tell me, I really don't think I can do that today. It's like, okay, we won't be doing it today, but we will do it another time.
I think what you've hit the nail on the head there, and something that some of us possibly take for granted or haven't really reflected on enough yet, is that the thing that stays centre to all of this is the relationship and her trust in you. And I mean, that's hard sometimes as a parent and particularly as a mum, because you then tend to bear the brunt of all of the worst of the behaviour. But at the same time, if that remains at the foremost, if you say you're going to do something and then you do it, if you can read her signs and she knows that you get her, then that's building the long term. That's building the trust for the long term, and that you have to be flexible, because that's part of what it is that she needs, but that's part of the maintaining and building the relationship that's been able to allow you to make the progress you have, I suppose. I guess what many people will be wondering is, what do you do? Where do you go for the information? And what are some of the key first steps to take?
Yeah, so it's a really lonely ride, right? So I think it's becoming more open right now that, more kids are getting their piece of paper that says it, or recognition and things like that. But the piece of paper that recognises is just the first step. It's just that opening of the door for you to then decide, okay, which way are we going to go? And for me, the best way to go is to just be open and to forget everything else that you ever read, learnt, grew up in, are told by people that you don't, when people tell you things and you just in your core, you're just like, oh no, that's a no. But you're like, oh, but I should, and that's what everyone else does. Like,
that tuning into your gut. Yep, getting into your body, tuning into your gut. What is your gut telling you? What is your heart telling you? Because your head can only go off those previous experiences, but you'll know in your body what's right and what's not right.
And the lens through which they're giving you that advice that's not your lens, and that's not your child. So you need to tune into, I am this child's mother. I probably know them better than anybody else. And so trying to block out all of that noise and just pick and choose the things that feel right for you, and explore and be open and listen to the child and watch the child and collect that data and look back over time and just be really open. I love to read all the books and watch all the things and be in all the groups on Facebook, and follow all the people on Instagram, but then it's all with a grain of salt. And then it's just trial, error, watching, listening, and then trying something else, but then remembering 2 years later, we tried that thing, it didn't work then, but I feel like now we should try it again. Just constantly moving, tuning in, resetting, and keeping yourself as well, like really taking care of yourself.
I'm glad you made that point there at the end, because I guess I've watched you on this journey for a long time, and there's definitely times where this is exhausting, or every day it's exhausting, not times, every day is exhausting, but there's certainly some phases where you don't have the energy in the headspace for this, and you need to give yourself permission to rest. Advocating for a child who's neurodivergent, or any child that has any form of additional needs, or particularly someone with PDA where it's not obvious to anyone else and you're getting the brunt of it at home, you can't be on all of the time. And when you've been dealing with this basically from the time that she's born, you now got a 10-year-old, that's a long time of trauma for you, trauma for her, living in this state of constant fight flight for many of those years. And then there's this expectation of got to do more, and I've got to do more, and to be always learning. And you can't be always learning, it's exhausting. So can you talk to us about that journey for you, and how you've been able to be more gentle with yourself on that process?
Yeah, that's gentle with yourself. Yes, definitely. And so much self-compassion for the things that you just have to say no to. Like, I would love to go out for dinner with friends more. I would love to, be more involved in my community. I would love to chat more in the threads with my family. But those are all things that take emotional energy, and you have to conserve so much of that emotional energy to be the nervous system of your child. And so boundaries and walking, sauntering, nutrition. Nutrition is a really hard one when you're tired and you're emotional and things. So really learning what you can get that is super easy, but high protein, things like that. Because when you are feeling better, you are obviously able to respond. I go to bed at 9:30 every night. I don't stay up late. I would love to. Sometimes I think, oh my gosh, I want to watch this show till midnight, but I just can't, because I know tomorrow that will not serve me well.
Yeah.
So boundaries, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a roller coaster, isn't it? Because we've all been there, when your nervous system's shot, you are running on fight flight constantly. The demands around you just keep getting more intense, and you've got nothing left to give. So you go to the chocolate, or you go to whatever the crutch is that helps you cope at that time. Maybe it's the Netflix at 11 o'clock at night, because that's the only time that you have time for yourself. But that also then just keeps the spiral going, doesn't it? And it's then hard. You need a circuit breaker in there, and that opportunity to say, oh, I've got to try and put myself first here for a minute. It's hard to put yourself first when you've got those sort of demands, because
and
these
getting
kids,
external supports
yeah,
as well.
yes,
Right?
I think that's a big piece, isn't it?
We live far from our family, interstate, and so in times where things have been difficult, I've brought au pairs in, and we've had people living with us, helping us, because however you get it, you need a village, right? You really just can't do it all fully on your own. And it doesn't always have to look like, your mum lives around the corner. And, that's amazing if she does. But also with PDA, maybe your mum lives around the corner, but she doesn't really understand it. So finding the village of people who do get you, and maybe they're not even in your environment, maybe they're online, just someone who you feel like they get me, they see me, they hear me, that's massive.
So I'm mindful that we could talk about PDA all day. It's so complicated, and it's so nuanced to each individual, like anything we're dealing with in this space. But I guess the key takeaways for so many parents out there who are just beginning on this journey, and that can resonate with all of the things you just said and are not knowing where to start, what would be some of your sort of key starting points?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of letting go. There's a lot of, there is a lot of grieving for a more traditional parent-childhood situation, and just lean into that, cry, journal, talk to somebody, do all of that, because once you get out the other side of that, that knowledge is power piece comes in, and that, okay, I'm actually, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to really change this kid's life and be this mother that I can be. And so learning, discerning what is for us, what isn't for us, constantly reflecting, and living sort of moment to moment as you can, always knowing that tomorrow's another day, and that you're doing your best. I guess it's really about leaning into your relationship together, really being kind to yourself and kind to them, learning and taking the journey together, I think, is a really nice way to, a nice lens to put on it.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's so much more to explore and unpack in this space, and I hope that for each of you, you can jump onto those platforms and start to explore some of this information for yourself and really step into your power in this space. It's going to be a journey, and you're not going to get it all right, and that's absolutely okay. That is part of what parenting is, and that's part of what it is that we're here to support families with as well. So reach out if you need some help, and we can direct you towards some of our favourite professionals. But it's a ride.
It is a ride.